Hey guys, this is Lane with the Simple Passive Cashflow Podcast, the new newsletter. I'm only going to be doing that bi-weekly because I'm busy and you're busy. I'll be putting a lot of personal stuff on there too. I know a lot of you guys are interested in what I'm up to and things other than real estate. So if you're interested in that, go to SimplePassiveCashflow.com or shoot me an email at lane@SimplePassiveCashflow.com. Today I've got another great guest, Jacob Ayers here. Hey Jacob.
Hey Lane, how are you?
Yeah, so Jacob is another young professional, and me personally, when I listen to these podcasts, I don't really get much from listen to Uncle G, Grant Cardone podcast, as you were saying earlier. I mean, it's kind of neat. It's funny and good entertainment value, but it's not very practical advice. Jacob is currently a young professional real estate investor, and he's also the host of the Real Estate Way and Wealth and Freedom podcast. And he graduated from the Oklahoma State University with a degree in fire protection and safety engineering. And he's currently in Houston, Texas, where he is just chipping away at these rental properties, kind of breaking his way into the smaller multifamilies, which I think it will bring a lot of guys a lot of insight, because a lot of guys are just kind of chipping away at their portfolio, and then you can kind of give them little insights today, Jacob. So first question we always like to ask our guests is, how much simple passive cash flow are you making today, and how are you doing it?
Hey, yeah, Lane. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited to be here. I think it's going to be really fun. So right out of the gates, I'm closing on my 10th unit right now. And right now I'm earning about $2,300 in passive income per month. So yeah.
Of course, it goes up and down all the time, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so slowly getting there. How much are you thinking that, you might want to quit the day job? You got like a number in your head?
Yeah, I've always had this number, and it's a little bit arbitrary, and it's a number you hear a lot, but I really want $10,000 a month in passive cash flow before I'd feel comfortable quitting my earned income. So that's where my near-term target is.
So one question I usually ask people on those these coaching calls that I do is, and I'll ask you too, Jacob. Say you had $6,000 to $7,000 of passive cash flow today. How would your life be a little bit different? You're well on your way to your 10 grand a month.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a single bit different, Lane. And here's why. I don't spend any of my passive cash flow that I earn right now in the near term. I'm snowballing that and buying more and more property. So I'm only living off of my earned income still. So if you gave me $6,000 of passive cash flow today, my life wouldn't change a single bit. I would just continue to save that and reinvest it.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I mean, the way I think about it is keep putting your foot down on that accelerator. Don't put the cruise control. You hit that
exactly
that magic number. So I'm in this. I believe it, man. You'll get there. So you weren't always like this, doing this passive cash flow thing. I call this the Han Solo question, because if you watch Star Wars, which I don't know why you wouldn't, Han Solo and Chewbacca were just low-life smugglers cruising the galaxy until they met Luke and Leia and their lives took a pivot. Maybe describe a time in your life when your life took a pivot too.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, Lane, because I think it happens at different magnitudes and different times for different people. So like many of your audience members listening in, Lane, I was kind of born and raised with this blueprint to go to school, get a good education, get a good job, further that education in college, study something different so that you can end up with a good job, right? So that's how you and I kind of taken this path and became engineers. Well, I found that this blueprint only gets us to our mid-20s. So here I was with a good corporate engineering role and looking at like what was next in my life. I'd always had something to shoot for, something next, something to strive for, right? So here I was looking for that next step, and I kind of was looking around and realized it was, well, retirement in like the next 40 years if you're lucky. So that was kind of when I began to start looking for different alternatives and something else to do with my time. And I'd say that was kind of like this pivotal moment in my life where I thought, okay, well, I can either put my nose to the grindstone, sock away money in my 401k and live a mediocre, comfortable life for the rest of my life, or start looking for different things to do. And that's kind of where I stumbled upon real estate investing, and it's led me to where I'm at today.
Yeah, so if the listeners want to go and download the book that I did, Simple Passive Cashflow /book, I identified a few things that happened in a bunch of people's lives that were kind of the change that happened, or like the trigger that happened at work. Like, some people, they got laid off. One person got fired because of other people's doing. I think myself, I just, as I kind of detailed there, I just had a really bad experience in working in construction engineering. Being the new guy, traveling all the time, it just kind of became a little bit too much. Do you remember like specifically what it was that one day you came home and you're like, screw this sucks? Like,
Well, it wasn't anything so dramatic like that. There were no like impending sense of doom or layoff. But it's kind of a little bit of a funny story. So I'm sitting in my cube one day, and I'm working on Excel spreadsheets like all engineers do, right? You put everything in Excel spreadsheet from your personal to professional life. It's just all in Excel. So here I am. I'm like, okay, I'm making a pretty good salary here. Let's just see. I had this term in my mind at the time, and I was calling lifetime earnings, kind of like a racehorse, if you will. So I was wondering, like, I wonder how much money I'll earn over my lifetime, and I'll make some assumptions. To start out with my salary now, let's assume, a 4% raise every year, maybe in year 5, jump up 10 or 15%, from
I'll get manager level, and then maybe
right.
director.
So I've got this Excel spreadsheet built out, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, okay, my lifetime earnings, if I work from now till I'm 65, are going to be, I don't know, let's say it was going to be like 3 or 4 million or whatever it was. So I look at this number and I was just like, man, that's so disappointing. I'm going to work my whole life and only earn 3 or 4 million, or I can't remember what the number was, but it was something along those lines. And I just thought, well, I've always thought that I would make a lot more money in my life than this. I've always thought I'd be much more successful. So this route's just not going to work for me. This path is just not going to fulfill what I need. So I went back to the drawing board, and that was kind of where I started looking for things to grow my wealth potential through. So that was kind of my like aha turning moment. So not so dramatic. I wasn't laid off or, had some kind of dramatic event, but that was kind of what triggered my head to like start thinking differently.
Then you went on the internet and you just Googled the heck out of it.
There's a black hole from there. Yeah.
Right. So next question is the worst life or business moment. What did you learn? What was the lesson learned? Maybe something can glean some advice here, not make the same mistake.
Well, luckily I've not made too many mistakes in my short career so far, but I would say like the biggest hurdle I've had to come over, or the biggest lesson learned, is thinking small. If you've got this small mindset that you're just going to sit at your cubicle and work for the next 40 years and put 5 or 6 or 8 or 10% or whatever in your 401k and retire happy, I think that's probably a false dream that you're living. So I would say the biggest mistake I had was starting to fall into that trap and thinking too small, really.
Yeah, and I think maybe I should start changing this question, because the people that I'm kind of bringing on are more of the passive investor types. Not the house flipper, not the crazy entrepreneur. And I asked this question, and it's kind of very similar to when I answer it. I don't think you and I have really made that big of mistakes, because we just don't take these big risks. Like, we're not out there buying this 40% occupied house or this $700,000 flip.
Something I'd add to that, Lane, is, I think you and I are doing things with risk associated with them, but the way we hedge this risk is through education. And you and I both spend a lot of time, with personal development, educating ourselves through resources like this podcast and others, reading books, consuming material. So I think that's a really good way to hedge risk, is through education. And I know you're a big proponent of that as well.
Yeah. And I also see the dark side of that too. Guys, they'll listen to these podcasts at 2x speed. I mean, and I've been coming to coin this term called the real estate groupie, or the BP bro. Guys, they listen to this stuff all the time. What's your take on, like, at what point do you just pull the trigger?
Oh man, you're so right there, Lane. And you've got some good terms coined there too. The BP bro, or the real estate groupie.
What do you call them?
I've got this little term I've kind of come up with, and I call it the learn do ratio. And it's kind of the same concept you're talking about. Lots of people just crush podcasts almost for a living, 2 times speed, listening to 10 different podcasts every day, reading books, going to meetups, going to, networking events, all those things. Those are all good, but they never take action. And that action step is the most important. You can read all the books you want, listen to all the podcasts you want, go to all the all the real estate investing clubs you want to, but it doesn't make any difference if you don't act with that information. So yeah, I think you've got to really take action is where that rubber meets the road.
Right. And, I'll borrow something from corporate America, which is kind of the reason I still go. They actually got a lot of good techniques. They have this 70-20-10 rule. If you've ever heard of that, HR talks about it a lot. But 70% is doing it. 20% is learning from peers, kind of like what's happening here. And, maybe I guess that's kind of like podcasts, because you're kind of in the conversation a little bit.
Sure.
And then 10% is just books and academics. So the 70-20-10, if you kind of apply that to your learning, 70% is doing it, like you said. So
yeah, I think that's very true.
Some guy probably paid like $300,000 for that study to come up with that. I don't know. I'm sure
probably so.
Our government, right?
Right.
So, next question here. What is a 2-week experiment and a 6-month project you've been working on? I know the last time we talked was back in November, so a while ago. We kind of talked to us a little bit about what you've been working on, and then what's up for the next 6 months.
Yeah, so a 6-month experiment I've been working on is meditation. So I'm kind of a high-strung guy. I always I wake up, I go. So having to sit down and just take 10 minutes and do absolutely nothing is pretty challenging for me. So I've been working on that, just trying to meditate every morning through the Headspace app. I find that really useful. It's just this free app, or there's a paid version on your iPhone or Android, and it's a guided meditation course. So I really like that. And the other question was a 2-week project I'm working on. Is that it?
Yeah, I guess I'll add on to that. Another good Headspace app. Headspace is a good one. It's like very you progress from each lesson. Another good one is Insight Timer. That's another good app on the Apple.
Okay.
I don't know if it's on Google, Android. I don't really care. I got Apple.
Yeah.
stick with the program, but Insight Timer, I might want to try that one out too.
Okay. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I'm not very good at meditating, so I could use any of the help I get. And it's just the first one I came across was recommended, but I really like it and it helps out. I think it helps me kind of clear my head and start the day with like a fresh mindset. So yeah, it's been working really well, and I'm going to try to keep going with it.
Yeah. So in terms of investing, what are you kind of looking at for the next couple deals? What's your criteria that you're looking at?
Yeah. So, I invest for cash flow, Lane, like many people out there, especially young people. I invest in markets of Oklahoma and Texas for the audience members that are listening that are either in Texas, less likely in Oklahoma, but are familiar with those markets. And I'm in a small multifamily space right now. So duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. And I'm going to probably grab a couple more of those up, kind of build my cash flow. And I'm really looking to start transitioning into small to medium sized multifamily properties.
So what's the unit count for that? Because I think people are all over the place with,
Yeah, it is vague. Like, good point. If I say medium sized multifamily, what's that mean to you? Probably means something different to me. So what I mean by that is approximately 18 to 50 units is kind of the next target size I'm going to start looking at.
So you've got the community bank size, because for me,
Yeah.
The problem with that area is like the lending is kind of no man's land. You don't got the Fannie Mae debt, but if you're local, then you can pick up those community banks, right?
It's a great point, Lane. Great point you bring up. And I've kind of found the sweet spot there with my local lenders. I feel that they've really have very competitive products to offer. And that's where I've financed all of my properties up to this point, mostly through local credit unions.
Yeah, and I'll just mention it there, something not to do in networking 101 is to like contact Jacob and ask him who his credit union is. Like, as much as we like to help each other, that would actually hurt Jacob, because now people are going to be hitting that credit union up, and then it just makes Jacob look bad when some newbie calls the credit union trying to get the same loan. So, a lot of things, a lot of real estate investors, yeah, we like to be very abundant mindset, but certain things are just like, oh man, like You guys just shouldn't ask that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out what real estate investors are willing to share. Like you ask for a recommended resource, like a book or podcast. Absolutely, many people are going to give you their recommendations. Maybe for a contractor, not so much because that contractor's time is limited and they want to,
Right. Or a
you know,
broker too.
yeah, right. Brokers, contractors. Now, maybe on the flip side, property managers. Everybody wants their property manager to be successful and grow. So, yeah, there's things that people are willing to recommend, and other times people hold those cards a little tighter to their chest. But I would just say, get out there, start looking for yourself. Once you are making those connections, things will start to come a little easier.
Right, right. Go and get some vendors of your own. Maybe you haven't even worked with them, but you at least interviewed them, and then you can say, "Hey, Jacob, I tried these 4 community banks, and this is what I got back from them. Have you heard of them?" And then maybe
Yeah, exactly.
now you're gonna have a conversation at that point.
Right. Very true. Good points.
What is your simple passive cash flow number that you're working on? And I know you mentioned it's $10,000 a month, but what's that higher level cash flow number? I think when you're kind of definitely on cruise control.
Are you asking beyond that $10,000 a month?
Yeah, or is $10,000 enough?
No, $10,000 is not enough, as crazy as it sounds. I haven't really quantified what's beyond that point, Lane. Um, I want to achieve this $10,000 a month passive income by the time I'm 30, which is 2 years from now. So that's kind of been my near-term goal. And really, I haven't looked beyond that in a quantifiable measure yet. So it's a good question, but one I don't really quite have the answer to yet.
So let's just say you had like $20,000 passive a month. What would
Is that
your kind of your day be like? If you can kind of picture that, what kind of projects would you be working on? Would you be still picking up properties or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to pick up properties, at least I think so, for as long as I can, pick up as many properties as I can. But beyond that, once I've, let's say I've got $20,000 a month in passive cash flow, that's $2.4 million a year, if my calculations correctly, that's more than enough to, live on. And so I would still continue to invest, probably buy larger multifamily deals, be involved in that capacity. But I really want to start giving back as soon as possible. And what I mean by that are, I don't need many things myself, Lane, like yourself. I'm a young guy. I don't have any family, children, anything like that. So, I can get by on pretty little. I know you're very familiar with that. You've lived on what you call it, the ramen noodle cheapo diet. Is that it?
Yeah, not anymore. I try and eat foods and
I can't do that anymore either. But, still nonetheless, I drive an old pickup. I don't have a flashy lifestyle. I don't, wear expensive watches and jewelry. So I'm a pretty low key guy. So where I'm getting at with all that is it doesn't take much to satisfy my personal needs. So once I have that cash flow that you're posing, I would be able to then help other people through organizations that I like. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll kind of say I wasn't a real big car guy before, but then I got a Mercedes and I like cars. And it's not that expensive. I mean, the lease is like less than $500 a month. So I mean, you'll get there. And the next question is kind of what do you something that you recently burned your cash on for time savings and improvement in quality of life? Or something that you're gonna do in the very near future, maybe in the next few properties as a celebration.
Yeah, that's a good question. So every time I buy a property, I like to go on just like a little weekend adventure getaway as like a celebration. So anytime I close on a property, I'll go to Belize or California, or maybe one day I need to make my way out to Hawaii and visit you, Lane. But yeah, so that's kind of like my little reward for, all the hard work of getting all the way through closing. So, I've taken a couple of those trips recently. I mentioned I've gone to San Diego recently with my dad and a buddy. So yeah, those are kind of like my little like rewards for that. Now, in terms of money I've spent to help save time, it wouldn't be any kind of material possession. It's not like a new truck or a, new piece of equipment, but I do a lot of podcasting, as you mentioned, Lane. So I'm always, hiring out, outsourcing things, outsourcing tasks. So that really helps save my time for better and higher use activities.
What about going back to the trip? Are you booking that thing before you get that property under contract, or at what point do you book in that thing? Or
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It kind of depends on where I'm going. So oftentimes I'll have an idea of where I want to go and I'll start looking at it once that closing day gets a little sooner, because I just want to make sure I'm booking that trip after my closing date, right? I don't want to book that closing trip before. Sorry, I don't want to book that trip before closing, because sometimes those closing dates gets extended, and I don't want to have to deal with that while I'm out of the country or whatever. So I'd say maybe like halfway through. Usually, I've got an idea of where I want to go at least. So
yeah, give
yeah,
yourself a couple week buffer there.
sure,
I
yeah,
was off to Japan, and then I got this email. I was standing at the gate, and I got this email saying I needed to notarize these papers to close 170 unit, and I was like, oh, here we go.
yeah. I've had to sell a property before from the slopes of Breckenridge, Colorado. So that was interesting in itself. And that's when I was like, oh man, I gotta stop doing this. I need to, be in the moment here. So yeah.
Yeah, cool. There's something that you recently changed your mind on.
Flipping properties.
Is it part of the program, or are you just totally, you think it's a distraction?
It is a distraction, and I still recognize that. But I've gotten to where I'm a little more interested in building systems to procure properties to rehab and flip. So I used to think like, that's just another day job. I don't want another day job, which is true, but I've really gotten interested lately in building systems and processes. So I want to build some more or less like a small house flipping business to then use the income from that business to invest in passive buy and holds.
Yeah. And I'll kind of tag along that. I mean, I always said flipping is kind of a more active activity.
It absolutely is.
As I try and like sell off my single family homes, I'm realizing that they're not selling like hotcakes. Maybe because it's probably my pricing. But what I'm doing is, as they naturally become vacant, I just fix it up, maybe put in 20, 30 grand. And then that gets it into the retail status. And then it goes like in a few days and at a higher price.
Sure.
And so I'm not really setting out to do the burst strategy, but definitely I was like, well, now I realize why these guys like to do this. Just like popping the price. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of work, a lot of risks too.
Yeah, it is.
Is that something that, is that how you got your first few properties and you kind of fixed it up on your own, or did you just more go with the turnkey route?
Yeah, let's talk about my very first property, because it's a pretty fun story and it will probably catch a few eyes. I bought my very first property for $25,000. And many of the listeners out there are thinking, $25,000 property, what does that look like? Well, yes, it does exist. It was livable, it was rentable, it was rent ready when I bought it. So this was in my home market of Oklahoma. I bought it with traditional financing, 20% down. So I paid $5,000 down and some closing costs. And I rented that property out for, I believe at the time it was $475. So very small numbers here, but yeah, to answer your question, I bought my first few properties using traditional financing from local lenders.
Right. Have you ever thought about doing the house hacking thing, or?
I have so much, Lane. So, like many of us, when we're getting started down this path of real estate investing, looking at bigger pockets and all these podcasts, it's a very popular and well-mentioned strategy out there, especially by guys at like bigger pockets. So
Bigger pockets bros.
Exactly. Yes. Well, so I really wanted to buy a fourplex, possibly a triplex or a duplex in my home market of Houston, Texas, where I currently live. But the properties where I wanted to live at, I couldn't afford, and they wouldn't cash flow or even come close to being economically feasible to buy and house hack. So I was kind of at this crossroads, and I've tried this strategy for very long. I've looked at hundreds of properties. And if anybody's out there listening that's familiar with Houston, Texas, I live inner loop, and I was looking for properties inside the loop. Well, the properties that are inside the loop are priced at, sometimes upwards of $200,000 per unit. So sometimes you can find a $400,000 duplex, even upwards of a $900,000 fourplex. And you and I know right off the bat that those numbers just don't work out very well.
Right.
You're not going to cash flow, especially living in one unit. So I tried for a very long time to make this house hacking strategy work before I had to finally just give up and say, I'm just going to invest where the numbers make sense and live where I want to live, even though those two places are in different areas.
Right. And that's kind of buying properties outside the loop in Houston, locally,
Or very far outside the loop in Oklahoma.
Right. Right. That's what I was kind of wondering. I mean, a lot of guys, they think they're going to do this house hacking strategy, but I mean, you're a 28-year-old bachelor, and I think you're getting a little too old for that. All these guys
Yeah,
are
it's
older.
definitely nearing that term. So
Yeah, it's starting to become, you're becoming a little bit too old for that, I think.
yeah, and I mean, if you're out there and you're 28 years old and you want to do that, great. I say it's still a good strategy, especially if you want to live that kind of lifestyle. Go for it. I think it's a great strategy. Heck, if you're 30, 40, 50, doesn't matter how old you are. If you're willing to do that and make those sacrifices, I think it's a brilliant strategy to get started investing in real estate. I just kind of missed that boat. It really wasn't working for exactly how I wanted it to. So I've given up on that strategy and moved on. But yeah, if you're thinking about it, I'd say at least look into it.
Yeah, yeah. And to your point, I mean, if you don't, if someone doesn't have any rental properties under their belt, and they're kind of coming in late in the game and they just low on resources, I guess that's just the stuff you got to do, right? You got to suck it up, or if not, you got to do what Jacob did and put on a spreadsheet and realize like what's going to happen if you don't.
Yeah, right.
Simple math. The math to tell you what to do. So in this seller's market, think of like a new guy coming in and he doesn't have like significant level of cash flow nor liquidity. What do you think they should be investing in? Say they are only able to save like $5,000 a year and they've got maybe about 10, 20 grand of liquidity savings. What should they be focusing on at this point?
Well, okay, so this person doesn't have a lot of money to spend in other words, what you're saying, Lane. So I think you've really got to look for low entry point markets. If you're going to buy a property you want to live in, I think using an FHA loan is a great strategy. And what that allows you to do is put a very low down payment, sometimes as little as 3.5% down. So you could buy a $100,000 property for $3,500 down plus your closing costs and all of that. So, something in that price point, this person could afford. If they're not really interested,
you house hack that.
You very well could too. I mean, you could buy a duplex. You could buy a single family home and rent out a couple of bedrooms to some friends. Yeah, there's lots of ways you could do it, but I think getting that low down payment is a very good tool to get you started along your real estate investing journey.
Yeah. So Tony Robbins identifies two large concepts that we're continually struggling to gain perfection at. The first is the art of fulfillment, and the second is science of achievement. So let's kind of tackle these one at a time. What's your secret or hack to the art of fulfillment?
Yeah, the art of fulfillment is so, we kind of touched base on it earlier, but I'm a pretty simple guy. I don't need like a lot of flashy things, nice vehicles. At least at this moment, I haven't opened that can of worms. I'm really trying to hold off on, going out and buying my first Mercedes. But for now, my 2004 GMC Sierra is treating me just fine. So while that's going along, I'm just going to keep it as is. So the art of fulfillment for me is what drives me is beyond monetary reward for myself, through passive cash flow, is helping others and giving back to other people. So I've always had a soft spot in my heart for kids in poverty, and I don't really have any kind of like reason or background why. I just always, have had a soft spot in my heart, that is, for kids in poverty. So I've always wanted to be that person who writes a big check to a school or, some kind of charitable foundation for these kids. So that's kind of what drives me and fulfills me beyond just personal needs. And in terms of the productivity hack, one, Tony Robbins is such a great leader and inspirational guy, and he's really pulls good stuff out of people just like this. I think this is a really good question. I would say just getting after it every single day. And that for me starts in the morning. So lots of people say, yeah, I just wake up in the morning. I've got a morning routine. And I used to think that was kind of like, just a generic answer, but I've been waking up early for several years now. And I just tackle my day on my own terms, get it started, plan it out. And I think the biggest fuel to my fire has been writing my goals down every single day. So it always keeps them at the forefront of your mind. and setting big goals and chasing it with even bigger actions. So I think for me, that's kind of been my productivity hack.
Yes. Any quirky things that you do? Like if somebody follows you around and it's like, "Oh, what are you doing that, dude?"
Let's think about that. Any quirky things? I'm sure there's a lot of quirky things that I do that I don't think are quirky. Maybe I ought to let somebody else answer this.
Right. That you just developed it and it's just a part of how you do things, but it's just like people are like, wait, can you show me how to do that again? Like, what did you just do?
Man, I can't think of anything, to be honest. I don't know.
But that's the thing. It just becomes natural, right?
Yeah. Maybe if somebody pitches a crazy idea, I really look into it. Like, people just talk, nonsense or crazy ideas or grand plans and, just sweep it under the rug or let it go by. I'll really research into something like that. So, somebody will say, have you thought about, investing in this crazy new thing or, looking at this? I'm always one to kind of dig a little deeper and, pull back the curtains a little bit.
All right. And I think if there's one trait that is consistent amongst all real estate investors is that they are questioners. They don't just
that's a good way to put it.
With a grain of salt. They just don't take it as being that's what it is. They go and investigate it, and they go out at night, late at night, and Google, bang away at the computer board and figure it out and Google it and watch YouTube videos.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on, Jacob. Why don't you give out your URL and way to people get a contact with you?
Yeah, sure. For more information, resources to connect with me, you can visit www.jacobAyers.com. That's JACOBAYERS. And I also, as you mentioned, Lane, host a podcast called The Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom. You can find it pretty much anywhere you can find podcasts. So yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, connect with me on social media. I'm pretty responsive. Love to talk to people about real estate and all things investing. So yeah, thanks so much, Lane, for having me on. It's been fun.
Yeah, and make sure you guys share the podcast with your friends. I've kind of given up asking you guys to put it up on social media because all you guys are very shameful that you guys are living a shadow life as investors. Your day job, and you don't want your coworkers to see. But if you got a buddy at your work, shoot them an email. Say, hey, these are here's some good contents. The rent to value ratio. I think that's a good starter.
Yeah, absolutely. Do what Lane said.
Yeah, because if at the end of probably in 5 to 10 years, you're gonna probably be sitting in a place where you're may not be working, and you're gonna need to have someone to have the midday lunch with. And I've got guys like Jacob that I can probably call when I'm bored in the middle of the day, not doing anything.
Just kicking our feet up, drinking mojitos on the beach, right?
Right. Maybe house hacking will be so bored at that point, just to have people around us.
There you go.
All right, Jacob. Well, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, Lane, thanks so much. It's been fun. Take care.
Bye.